Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, huh? It's Tuesday, September 6th, the 248th day of the year. There are 117 days left in 2022 as we begin our third season of Tuesdays with Thom. Welcome to another edition, and let's say several years ago at the landmark 16th Street Baptist Church in downtown Birmingham. A panel of former football players were gathered in the church to talk football. This football discussion wasn't about who won and who lost games. It wasn't about touchdowns and field goals. This discussion ran deeper. It was about a major change in the landscape of the Southern culture. The panel featured 9 men who ushered in college football integration in the state of Alabama at the University of Alabama and Auburn University. In the days that lurched between the last of social segregation and the beginnings of integration in Alabama and the South, Alabama college sports teams had not yet crossed that barrier to integration. 6 years after Governor George Wallace's famous stand in the schoolhouse door, the state's SEC teams, namely the University of Alabama and Auburn University, were still all white. The men gathered on the panel that day were the foot soldiers of Alabama college football integration. Our G-list guest today, Rick Davis, a former University of Alabama football player and professional football player, is the man who put that event together. And I'm proud to say that Rick is our G-list guest for today. So we look forward to having him. It should be a great conversation. So this edition of Tuesdays with Thom, of course, is sponsored by our partners, the Best Girl consulting firm. Best Girl has been providing customized solutions to executive issues for 34 years. Let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
That fits your needs. I'd like to offer a congratulatory note to Joyce Gilly-Gossam, who is our leader at Best Girls Project. She has been invited, or will be joining her alma mater, Illinois State's Foundation Board. And we offer our congratulations to you, Joyce Gilly-Gossam. So let's get to the roundtable regulars and introduce Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Michael Walker is a insurance executive, a business owner. Michael's been with us since the very start, since our first season, and pretty much has been here for every episode except I think 1 or 2 when he had some business obligations. And Barbara Wallace Edwards the same. Barbara's been here, and I don't think Barbara has missed an episode of TWT. So let's get them on here and see how their weekend was. Barbara, Michael, how we doing?
Doing well, TG. How are you this morning? Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning, sirs. How are you all doing?
We're
doing
well.
Doing great.
Right.
So, Barbara, how was your weekend? Tell me what exciting thing you did this weekend.
Thom, you're not going to believe this, but I didn't do anything this weekend. For the first time.
I'm not going to believe that.
No,
you're right.
First time in forever. I went to a funeral in Atlanta on Thursday. I got home about 7, 8 o'clock Thursday night. I didn't go back out the door until last night about 7 o'clock, and I went to the gym.
Wow.
I wasn't sick, but I just wasn't feeling the best. I even took a COVID test thinking maybe I have COVID or something. I think I was just tired. My body's just worn out.
The way you go.
I slept a lot. I watched a little bit of football. I read a lot, but I just rested. And that is highly unusual for me. I really had to check myself thinking, am I okay?
Well, it was that kind of a weekend. That's pretty much what we did. Just it was a relaxing weekend. It was great.
Yes.
I mean, I slept, and actually we went to two movies. We went to see Bullet Train, which was funny.
Right.
It was a comedy, and then we went to see the one about the genie and the I forget the name of it, 2000 something, but Idris Elba
Elvis. Yeah,
and
the big, I think
Tilda
the,
Swinton.
okay. I know that Idris has one out called The Beast, and I was actually planning to go see that on Saturday. I'd gotten
Yeah,
up, gotten dressed, and got ready to walk out the door, and it's like, no, I think I'm just gonna stay home.
yeah.
So I
I,
did.
yeah, I know I was tired, so I just stayed
Right.
in, and it was great. Other than going to those two films. Michael, how was your weekend?
My weekend was it was okay. I didn't do a whole lot but work. I had to work over the weekend, so I spent my time trying to catch up on work, and that's the best time for me to catch up on work is when there's a holiday and everybody's busy. The scammers are not calling me. I can have some peace and quiet. So I had some testing to do, so I studied and took tests over the weekend.
Well, I think we should say congratulations to you. I think you expanded your business over the last couple of weeks to include a new company down in Florida.
I did. I did. Thank you very much. It was certainly a labor intensive affair since we're talking about Labor Day, but we got through it, and it really tested my resolve. I will tell you that, but we
Well,
got it done.
congratulations, Michael.
Thank you.
Congratulations to Joyce as well on her appointment as on the foundation board. That's great, and congratulations on the second year anniversary for Tuesdays with Thom.
Third year.
Third year. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I'm losing track
Yeah.
of a year.
you missed
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been
Yeah.
great. It's they say time flies when you're having fun. It
Well,
has
I'll
flown
say
by
this.
quickly.
You and Michael have been with us from the very start, and we started in Birmingham.
Yes.
We did one show in Birmingham, and my good friend. And let me just say for him, I hope that he's doing well. Henry Ford. He had some surgery, some major
Oh, oh, I
major
didn't know
surgery,
that. Okay.
and but he's doing well, and we wish him the best.
Absolutely.
But then we moved it, and we got on StreamYard, and we've been there ever since. So it's been
Yes.
it's been good. So what you got for me, Barbara?
Well, Tom, I found out during some of my reading this weekend. I found out something that I didn't know, so I got some history for our viewers this morning. Venus and Serena Williams, of course, have been dominating the tennis world for quite some time now, but there's another pair of African American sisters who dominated almost 100 years ago. Their names were Margaret and Matilda Peters. The Peters sisters started playing tennis at a young age, and after gaining national fame, they were given the nicknames Pete and Repeat. And despite their prowess and abilities, they were not able to play in any of the white-owned tennis organizations. They weren't allowed to play. So there was an all-black organization called the American Tennis Association that the Peters sisters were able to be a part of. They competed in several matches and held the record for winning 14 doubles titles, paving the way for the Williams sisters. So that's a Black history fact or American history fact that I wasn't aware of. I don't know how many other people knew about the Peters sisters, but that's great to know.
Yeah, I wasn't either. Michael, what you got?
Well, since we celebrated Labor Day, I did research and I found out some interesting facts about Labor Day. The Central Labor Union and the Labor organized the first meet in New York City in 1887 to recognize Labor Day. Oregon was the first U.S. to make Labor Day a holiday. And then it later became in 1894, and 30 states started to officially celebrate it. And it was President Grover Cleveland that signed the bill after Congress passed making it a federal holiday. But originally, it was only for federal workers. And so the unions had to continue to and encourage their union employees to strike if it did not include them. And so then it started to include every that worked in union labor in this country, which I thought was pretty fair. And a guy, Peter J. McGuire, is known as the father of Labor Day. He went to Canada on internet called May Day, and they did it the of May. And you've heard the term May Day before, saying May Day, what have you. But the U.S. decided that it would be the first Monday in September and it into law. So that's how we got Labor Day. And we all now get a chance to celebrate Labor Day because of
it's interesting. Go ahead. You cut out a little bit, but go ahead.
I was going to say, as a kid, I remember all these different holidays, and I just accepted them as it was a fun thing as a kid growing up, and nobody ever decided to really explain. They explained Memorial Day to me and Veterans Day and the 4th of July. It's something like Labor Day and what have you. It's very interesting to see how it came about.
It's interesting too when you've been an entrepreneur, you work in your own business or what have you. You're very mindful of the major holidays, and then the other ones just kind of sneak up on you. And people say, "Oh man, so what are you gonna do Monday?" It's like, what happens Monday?
Yeah, what's going on?
That's Labor Day. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully I'll try not to work. But I did have to work a little bit yesterday on the show. So, anybody got anything else for us, Michael, Barbara?
Well, talking about the football games this past weekend. All of the SEC teams won except LSU, poor things. And they're giving them a lot of flack on social media for LSU. Oh, yes.
They played Florida State, right?
Yes.
I didn't see. I just saw that. I think they blocked a field goal or something at the end.
Extra point. It was extra point.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so they lost by 1 point, I think. But yeah, it was.
But I did see the interview with the coach, and he was very straightforward and very much owned up to the fact that they could do better. And,
I hope so. They're paying that man a lot of money, and so I hope they will do better.
And it's different now. I mean, LSU never lost games at home, especially night games.
Right.
And,
well, technically, this was in New Orleans at the Caesar Palace Dome, so it wasn't in Death Valley, but.
Yeah, but that's in their own backyard, though. That's
you're right.
I'm sure there were a lot of LSU fans there compared to FSU fans.
Yeah, Brian Kelly is getting a little heat because people feel like he threw his players under the bus, and there was some issues, I believe. So, stuff to come out at. Here in Atlanta, we had the Georgia and Oregon. University of Oregon. Leading up to that, there was a lot of former quarterback of Auburn, Bo Nix, joining Oregon. And I could hear all the people from own Bo Nix. We don't care about Bo Nix. Well, unfortunately, they did. Nix didn't do too well. And people said, that's Auburn. That's why he's gone. And now people are saying that Auburn got the better end of the trade deal by trading Nix to Oregon for Robbie Ashford.
Oh, yes.
I thought it was interesting because I watched maybe the first 10 minutes or so. I watched long enough for him to throw 2 interceptions. And it was like, well, he's back. He looks like he
looks like Bo.
He looked like Bo. And there's something, I don't know what it is, and I'm sure that the new coaches at Oregon will work on that. But he just has this thing where he just doesn't do the thing that makes sense.
Right.
He just kind of does something that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't turn out to in his team's favor.
Yeah, and which is surprising. I mean, his dad was a college quarterback, and you would have think the fundamentals would have been basic for him. Those are things that just come natural. You don't, talent is one thing, but that's his basic decision making skills sometimes too. So I'm a little surprised.
Well, I'll say in the first interception, it wasn't that defensive back made a hell of a play on the ball. He just he was in position, and he mounted, in my opinion, he kind of just and took that ball from the receiver. Some receiver has to help the quarterback and fight. I think he just overpowered the receiver, but that's bad. It was awful. On person, he threw it into like almost triple coverage. It looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that much of it. I don't know. I mean, everybody. He's a really good athlete, and so maybe at the next level, somebody will find how he fits. Well, I think he'll get a shot because he's a great athlete.
Okay.
But I don't know if he'll be a quarterback for somebody. Maybe one of those guys like that guy that was down in New Orleans the last couple of years or so ago. I don't know. Somebody will take a chance on him, and we'll see where it goes. But I remember when he came, and I remember that Coach Malzahn sort of just cleared the deck for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw where his girlfriend is an Auburn cheerleader.
Yes.
Was an Auburn, is an Auburn cheerleader.
Now his wife, they're now married.
Oh, okay. Well,
yes.
he had it all his way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that wasn't the best thing for him. Who knows? But I'm sure there's enough football out there with the NFL and the Canadian League and the World League and blah 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 that somebody will take a chance on him, and he'll get to play some more football if that's what he wants. Hey, he was making so much money in the NIL, he may not want to play football.
I was going to say he had to take a pay cut to go to the pros.
You guys got anything else?
I have to give a special shout out to South Carolina. Our dear friend Antley made sure that I knew that South Carolina won this weekend as well.
Who they play?
I don't know. Antley, if you're watching, please tell us who South Carolina played this past weekend.
He's the thing about the first games of the season, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's just unfair, but they all go out and play a chump team, and including Auburn, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Auburn played Mercer, and Alabama played
Utah State,
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, a game was always exciting when you didn't know who was going to win. Right. When it was a fair competition between the two teams. This is just a big scrimmage for your team, and you're going to whoop these guys. If you go out there and fumble 3 times in the first quarter, you're still going to win the game.
Right.
Well, I will say that Oregon was ranked number 11th in the country, and Georgia was number 3.
Yeah, now Georgia and Oregon was a closer match.
Yeah, and Florida played Utah, which was ranked number 7th in Florida.
Yeah. I thought Florida should have played Utah State, and Alabama should have played Utah. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know. It isn't up to me. I watch it. I hardly watched any of it this weekend. But it'll get more interesting as it goes. How did Auburn do? I didn't I saw they won big. Who was that they played? Parker or was Jackson Ola?
I heard we play Hoover High School. So. Play Mercer.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad for Coach Harsin.
Yes, me too.
He needs every win he can get.
That was a good one.
Tough, you know.
I think.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, well, let's go get to our. Let's go to Sean and listen. Sean has got a minute for us. Sean, where are you?
Good morning. My name is Sean Jones, and this has Got a Minute. Hello and happy Tuesday to everyone joining in with us this morning. I hope you all are well and in great spirits this week. It feels like the weekend rolled on by, and so did the first tank prototype. On this day in 1915, a prototype tank named Little Willie rose off the assembly line in England. Little Willie was far from an overnight success. It weighed 14 tons, got stuck in trenches, and crawled over rough terrain at only 2 miles per hour. However, improvements were made to the original prototype, and tanks eventually transformed military battlefields. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Sean Jones, and this has Got a Minute.
Thank you, Sean. So let's go to the G list. And here on Hollywood has the A list, and here on Tuesday with Thom, of course, we have the G list. Now, G list guest today is Rick Davis. Sports has always been a big part of Rick's life. He was born and raised in Bessemer, attended the University of Alabama on a football scholarship. And I got to play against Rick, and we've maintained a relationship since those days. And we laugh and talk a little bit about it because the players don't hate each other. The players find that common ground. And Rick has been, and I'll tell you a little bit about it, but he's been instrumental in some of the things that I've been able to do in my life. In 1974, Rick and Sylvester Croon, who was the first black coach in the SEC, they were elected permanent co-captains by their teammates. Rick was drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals in 1975, played in the NFL for 4 years, and then decided he would go to law school. Ray Perkins was his firm's first coach client, and Coach Perkins followed Coach Bryant as the head football coach at the University of Alabama. Rick has been involved in sports for 30 years. He's represented college and professional football and basketball head coaches, coordinators, assistant coaches, and administrators. And we are proud to have him on. Good morning, Rick Davis. How are you?
Great, Thom. Good morning to you. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well. I hope you are. I started to, and you'll take this the right way. I started to. They sent a picture of you in college, and when you had a lot of hair, and I started to put my picture up when I had a lot of hair.
There you go. Yeah. You think football calls that? I don't know football with the helmet.
I said we'll leave the hair picture out. That's right. So, Rick, I'm going to start off with the 9 is what I call them. You put together an event at the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, which is the infamous church where unfortunately the bombings took place in downtown Birmingham. And you put together a group of players and coaches, and I'm going to name James Owens, Coach Bill Oliver, Terry Henley, Sylvester Croon, Rick Davis, Ralph Stokes, Coach Jack Rutledge. He had some great stories, and myself and Cedric McIntyre. And we were on a panel. All of us were involved in football integration at a major level at the University of Alabama and at Auburn University. And it's one of those events that will always be a big part of my life. I think it went over very well. So I'm going to start with what gave you that idea? Why did you decide to pursue that?
My wife and I had gone to see a movie, the movie 42, about Jackie Robinson's story. And we came out of the movie, and I was taught it was probably in late April or so. And I was telling her, I just told her, I said, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to get the first black football players at Auburn and Alabama together and have just a panel discussion about, because I've never seen anything done like that, where those guys were talked to and have some white guys and some coaches and just talk about what it was like when there was the integration of the football program at Auburn and Alabama. And she kind of challenged me to do it. And so what I did is Sylvester Croom, as you said, Sly and I were co-captains at Alabama together. We were freshmen the same year and seniors. He's a great friend. I represented him when he was the first black head football coach in the Southeastern Conference. He was a client, but I called Sylvester because I wanted to make sure that we picked a date that he could do. He was coaching with the Tennessee Titans then, and so Sly gave me the date, and then I called Terry Henley, who was in Birmingham, and Terry played at Auburn, running back, and so I called Terry to get his help to get some guys from Auburn to come and be a part of it too. So we put it together. It came together. I was looking for a place to do it, a venue to have the everybody come together, and I couldn't find a place. Every place that I called was already booked, and so somebody at our firm said, "Why don't you call the pastor at the 16th Street Baptist Church?" And I thought, "Gosh, what a great idea that was." And so I called over, talked to the pastor's secretary, and she put me on hold and went and talked to the pastor. And she said, "The pastor would like to talk to you. Can you come over?" And I'm sure he wanted to check and make sure that I was legit and just kind of see what my motives were. So I went over and sat down and talked with him probably for about 30 minutes. And at the end of our conversation, he says, "You guys are welcome to do it. You can have it here." And so then it was a matter of, I called Paul Feinbaum. Paul was the moderator, and that was back when Paul was just leaving Birmingham, going national. And so Paul did it, and it was just Thom, you were there. You had a great stories. You and James being the first. James was from Fairfield. I grew up in Bessemer, and I remember playing against James when I was at Bessemer and he was at Fairfield. But it was a great night, and I have people. We didn't have a huge crowd that was there at the church, but a lot of people. There was a newspaper article about it, and it was I thought it just a great event, and it told the story. I think a story that's never been told, and I think that it still needs to be told more about, because the kids today in school, they don't know. That was I graduated from high school in 70, in 71, I guess May of 71. And so that was a long time ago. And a lot of people just don't know how things happen. I mean, you look at you look at Auburn and Alabama, and there are a lot of black players on both. There are black coaches on the sidelines, but like you and I talked about, Sly was the first black head football coach, and that's something that needs to be addressed. But that's how I decided. My wife more or less challenged me to do it, and we did it, and I was really excited about it, and appreciate you guys that participated.
Well, I can tell you it was a great event, and it was meaningful to me. We're having a few guys come back, I think, in a couple of months at Auburn, and some of the first guys, Harvey Glantz, Gary Redding, guys who played basketball, ran track, whatever. But we're calling them the forgotten ones because these guys were great. They were not just good. I mean, Harvey Glantz was one of the best in the world, and Clifford Outland was the fastest human in the world at 60 yards indoor. But they kind of drifted off, and nobody knows of them. And this guy asked me, he was doing a film. He said, "Do you think these players today know about you guys? And I said, well, probably not. I don't know that they have to. They've got their own lives and their own careers, but I think it's good when people recognize the accomplishments. And it was great that we got to hang with Sylvester and you and Ralph and Coach. Coach was so funny. But Coach Oliver coached at Alabama and Auburn.
That's right, he did, and I worked with him for years and years and helped him on different things. But yeah, he worked there. He was there when I was being recruited. He was at Auburn, and then he came to Alabama and was my position coach. But then when Terry was the head coach at Auburn, he hired Coach Oliver to be his defensive coordinator.
That's right.
And so right. Terry, and I represented the Bowden family, and Terry's a client now. He's at Louisiana Monroe. But kind of talking about the story, and I'd mentioned to you before we went on the air and stuff today, but Steve Skipper, I'm helping Steve Skipper with a book. It's a coffee table book, and what Steve was commissioned by the Bryant Museum in Tuscaloosa to do a painting just honoring Wilbur Jackson and John Mitchell. They were the first two black scholarship football players at Alabama. Wilbur signed in 1970. Back then, freshmen couldn't play on the varsity, so Wilbur was a freshman in 70, and then John Mitchell was a junior college transfer in 71, which was my freshman year. And so I remember Coach Bryant talking to the team in the first team meeting, and he was talking about just, hey, this is what's expected of you. This is what we're going to do. We're going to the wishbone. That was the year that Alabama changed their offense from a pro-style passing game to the wishbone. And he just said, don't tell your mamas, don't tell your daddies, don't tell your girlfriends that we're gonna surprise Southern Cal when we go to Southern Cal, when we go to Los Angeles. So, but it was, Steve Skipper, the Bryant Museum commissioned Steve to do a painting honoring Wilbur and John. So Steve did that, and Steve's a good friend, and I've helped Steve with some things around some paintings and some things that he's done before. And so what Steve and I talked about, let's put together a book. Let's put together a coffee table book with statements from former players, former coaches, administrators. Dr. Matthews, who was the president of the university when the football program was integrated. So we're putting together a coffee table book. It should be out by Thanksgiving this year with statements and comments from former players and all this stuff, telling about how the integration of the football program in Tuscaloosa affected their lives. And I think it's a great. I think it's going to be really interesting for people to read about, because Thom, as you and I mentioned, it's just like a lot of the kids today. There need to be classes, I think, in school where people remember the way things were in the 60s and 70s when we were going to school.
I think it is. I remember I was talking to my son one day, and I was telling him a couple of things, and his reaction was, "Oh, Dad, that stuff's not true. That didn't happen." And it's like I just let it go, because it's so far removed from his world today, till I let it go. And I speak to two classes every year, one at Texas A&M and one at Auburn. And the one at Auburn generally consists of all white kids. But I can tell you, they are so interested in that story. They ask great questions. They want to know that, because we're sitting in a classroom where I used to sit, and I can tell them I used to sit in this classroom, and I can, and then I'll tell them, I'll say, and just like now, I was the only black person in the room.
Nothing's changed.
But I think there's somewhat of an interest. I think a lot of times administrators and the people in charge are very hesitant to go back because they feel like people won't accept it or what have you, or maybe it'll affect the fundraising because fundraising is everything now
Oh, sure. That's
on
right.
the college campus.
Yep.
But it is. I don't know. I know it's a matter of pride for me and for a lot of the guys uh, that we were a part of that. And Coach Jordan and Coach Bryant, these guys, I always said it was Coach Bryant, Coach Jordan, and then the governor
That's
in
right.
that order.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
had some power,
They really did. And that was the thing. Coach Bryant was such a great leader. And there are things, I mean, I've got pictures of Coach Bryant, but he was such a great leader. And I remember that first meeting that we had. I was a freshman. Freshmen couldn't play on the varsity, and so, but it was Ralph Sylvester, um, Mike Washington, John Mitchell, and Wilbur Jackson in the team meeting room before the first day we're in Tuscaloosa. We're sitting in the team meeting room, and there are probably 120 people in that room, 5 blacks, and the rest are white. And it's one of those things where Coach Bryant just at the end of the meeting, after going through all the things, we're playing Southern Cal, we're going to the Wishbone, he said, "One last thing. I expect everybody to treat your teammates with respect. If that doesn't happen, you'll answer to me." He didn't say anything about black, white, whatever. It's your teammates. Treat your teammates with respect. We didn't have any problems. And it was just that the leadership from Coach Bryant set the tone. And I remember hearing John and Wilbur talk in Tuscaloosa when they put a plaque at the stadium, at the front of the stadium, a big bronze plaque that's on there of John and Wilbur, just commemorating the integration of the football program at Alabama. And it just, listening to John and Wilbur talk, I mean, John talked about how much he owed to Coach Bryant. He said, "I never would have accomplished anything close to what I have done in my life, but for Coach Bryant and his leadership and the impact that he had on me." And Wilbur's the same way, not just playing football, not just being on the football field, but the lessons, the leadership lessons that came from Coach Bryant down and changed all of our lives. And so that's one of those things where I just think, as far as from a racial standpoint, I mean, I remember I grew up in Bessemer when there were separate water fountains, separate restrooms, and that was the way things were. And it wasn't right, but there was nobody that really was taking a stand and saying this needs to change. We need to do things differently. So people like Coach Bryant were the ones that made it happen, I think, and Coach Jordan.
Well, he did. And Coach Auburn has always been a little different in that David Housel described Auburn's, they signed James
Right.
in 69. Signed Henry Harris in 68. He was first. He was the basketball player.
Right.
And then James in 69. I was a walk-on in 70, and they awarded me a scholarship within that same year. And what I will say, you mentioned Skipper and his book. There's a book coming out about James that should be out about the first of the year. James was as solid as a human being as you could find.
Yeah.
And after maybe the latter part of his life, he talked about the loneliness and how lonely it had been for him. He said that, I'll never forget this quote. He said that integration was like being dropped behind enemy lines. He said, it was just a incredibly lonely experience. And for a lot of guys, it was. I remember, I don't know if you remember Warren McVeigh. He played at SMU. And he was just an incredible player. And I was in this film called Breaking the Huddle, the integration of Southern college football. And this guy cried all through that film. He just cried. and he'd get upset with himself. He said, "I can't believe I'm still crying after all these years." But that's how it had affected him, and I think people misunderstand the loneliness.
Yeah.
James described. He said, "I was never at home. I left home, and
Mhm.
it was just a different thing." So
Yeah.
let Michael and Barbara ask a couple of questions, because
Okay.
you've got some. I want to ask you about the future of college football, because we've talked a little bit about that. But
Yeah.
let's, Barbara, you got some questions for Rick?
I do, Tom. But before I do that, I want to say
The
the
vibe.
coffee table book, Rick. I think that's a phenomenal, idea concept, and I'm looking forward to that. Several of our viewers have commented as well, saying they want to get a copy of that book. But I want to encourage people to also get a copy of Quiet Courage, which is a film that Tom, you put together, and it's about James Owens and the integration of football at Auburn University, and you know that one is a tearjerker as well. I mean, it just really touches your soul. And I think it's so important that the football players or the athletes, in period, at universities today know about that history. And I don't know if there's anything that you all can do to work with the administrations at both Alabama and Auburn and other schools to get them to understand the importance of letting the students and the student athletes know who paved the way for them, who opened those doors. And so it is, and maybe it takes having panels all over the place, panel discussions or whatever, but something definitely needs to be done to make sure that those kids are educated and understand the importance of the who paved the way for them.
Yeah.
It
I
just didn't
agree.
happen.
Yeah. No, it
Right.
didn't. And that's what I think a lot of players today, especially, I mean, they didn't grow up. Their parents probably didn't grow up in Alabama. They just don't understand the way things were in the
Right.
60s and 70s, and it just didn't happen. And it took an effort. And just like talking about loneliness, I mean, we would. Wilbur Jackson was from Ozark, Alabama, and Wilbur he was a great running back, played in the NFL, first round draft choice. Be a handful of us would be going out. Wilbur spent so much of his time. We had a TV room downstairs in the dorm, and Wilbur was always in the TV room, always. And so we'd be walking out to go somewhere, and one of the guys, again, you got 4 or 5 white guys, and there are a handful of black guys that are living in the dorm. One of the guys would stick his head in the door and say, "Hey, Wilbur, come on and go with us." And Wilbur would almost always say, "No, no, no, I appreciate that, but I'm just going to stay here and watch a little TV." And so that's what I've never asked Wilbur why I don't know if he was, you know, concerned about going out but if he was going out, and one of the things, Bobby Stanford roomed with John Mitchell. He was John Mitchell's roommate. And Bobby was a white guy from South Georgia. And in John's statement that's in the book, John talks about Bobby's parents when they would come from Georgia. They would drive over for a game, and they would bring Bobby something, and whatever they brought Bobby, they would bring to John. And so every time, I mean, if it had a basket, kind of a goodie basket and stuff like that, they'd have one for Bobby and one for John Mitchell. And I'd never heard that story until John told that about how a parent, the parents of the white guy were treating the black guy that was his roommate just like they were treating their son. And John said that meant the world to him, and that he would never forget that, and he could never thank them enough for treating him like that. So, but those stories need to be told, and that's why this coffee table book that we're doing, I'm really excited about it, and it's been an effort because a lot of guys just didn't respond. White guys or black guys, but it was like, well, I don't know if I really want to do that or something. But it's like,
Right.
I just think it's a great story that because Thom was a part of it, James Owens was a part of it, and it's just Sylvester and Ralph and John Mitchell and Mike Washington, and guys are getting older and guys are dying. James
Yes.
has passed away. Mike Washington's passed away, and it's just like those stories need to be told. And so I appreciate y'all doing what y'all are doing too to get the story out there.
Rick,
Thank you.
it's uh, uh, Wilbur sounds like James. James was always in the TV room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was he, he would take a shower and put on some clothes and go up to the TV room
Yeah,
and sit in the TV room all night. But that was
yeah,
where and I think a lot of it was, being those first guys, they didn't want to get in any trouble. They didn't
exactly,
want
Right.
anybody
exactly.
to say that they had done anything
Mm-hmm.
that was a negative reflection on the university.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
And
That's exactly right.
that was a part of our responsibility. Later on, guys go out, not as much anymore, but that was a period of time when football players, especially, would go out, they'd get in all kinds of trouble.
Oh yeah, oh
And
yeah. And
we,
the university police would bring them back to the dorm. They wouldn't
that's right,
arrest them or anything like that.
that's right,
They'd bring them back to the dorm and go down the hall and knock on Coach Rutledge's door, and Coach Rutledge would. That was he wouldn't tell Coach Bryant what happened. He would,
yeah,
but they had to answer to Coach Donahue or somebody like that would take them out and run them until they dropped, pretty
that's
much.
right,
But
that's right. So, Michael, what you got?
Well, good morning, Rick. Thank you for
good
joining
morning.
us. I
Thank you.
want to commend you on your vision and foresight working with State Senator Gerald Dowell to get a law passed to regulate agents in the state of Alabama. Thom always says Alabama's last except for Mississippi. Well, this is one time we were not last.
That's right. We were third. We were third. It was California, Texas, and then us.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did that. It was funny because I was representing players at that time, which I don't represent players anymore. But it was one of those things where I knew what was going on. I saw things that were happening, and players were, agents were coming in and giving players money and doing things that you're not supposed to do. And so what I did is I sent a letter to both the athletic directors at Auburn and Alabama and UAB. I sent them a letter, told them who I was, gave them my background, and told them what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to put together and needed their support to put together some legislation to regulate the agent business. I didn't hear back from anybody.
Wow.
None of them even responded initially. And then that was when Derek McKee and Terry Connor, I don't know if you remember, they were basketball players at Alabama. They got in trouble with guys named Norby Walters and Lloyd Bloom were going around the country giving money to athletes and signing them. And so that blew up after I had sent that letter to the ADs. About 2 or 3 weeks after that happened, I get a response from every one of them that said, "Hey, we need to do this." And that's when I reached out to Gerald Dowell, and or I think he called me because he had heard about that I had put some stuff together. What I did is I just got a copy of the Texas law and the California law, and just kind of revised it somewhat and gave it to Gerald Dowell, and then he took it and ran it through with everybody in Montgomery. But it's still, they revised it several times since then. There's still one in place, but you don't see it's hard to enforce it. That's the part of the problem is because if the player's not saying anything about the fact that the agent's giving money to them, and with all the name, image, and likeness and things like that going on right now, I'm not sure that the enforcement of that. Although now, if you're involved in name, image, and likeness, you're an agent trying to work with players on that, they have to be registered under that same legislation as well. But I appreciate that. That was again one of those things that you do, and you hope that it's going to change some things. And I'm not sure how much of an impact it had at that point, but maybe it scared away some agents from doing that. But a lot of it, there's a lot of exchange of money between agents and players that continues to go on, and I think it will always go on in that business.
Speaking of changes, when we played, we got $15 a month.
Big
They
time,
called it
big time.
laundry money.
Right.
We get our check the first of the
Yeah.
month.
Yeah.
Things have changed
Wow.
considerably now with the NIL and everything else going on. And you sent me you sent a little piece, and I think it's from ESPN, but it says that issues such as realignment, name, image, and likeness, and the transfer portal are likely just precursors to more seismic shifts in the sports landscape. So they said this is just the beginning, that it will continue to evolve and change into something that we probably won't recognize.
Right, right. That's exactly it. It is college sports, especially football and basketball, with the name, image, and likeness transfer portal. You can't coach players like we were coached,
No,
Thom. You
that's right.
can't get in a player's face and yell at them and grab them by the face mask and pull them in. That if you do that, player goes in and says, "You don't talk to me like that. I'll leave. I'm gone." So coaches have to kind of balance how they coach now with the way that they used to, and it's just the game has changed. I'm happy for the players. I wish we had gotten more than $15 a month, and if somebody were to say, "Hey, you guys want to get some checks? We can catch you guys up some," I'd be all for that. How about you, Thom? I don't think that's going to happen, though.
I don't,
They should.
I don't think so, man.
That ship
You're
has
right.
sailed, right? Yeah.
I think some of the ways we were coached, they put coach in jail today.
Oh,
Yes.
right. What Coach Bryant did at Texas A&M with the Junction stuff, it wasn't that bad in Tuscaloosa, but it was pretty bad. I mean, but it was one of those things where, I mean, I've got some pencil drawing somebody did of Coach Bryant that my dad took down to Coach Bryant in the summer of '82. My dad didn't go to college. He was a lot like Coach Bryant as far as he grew up on a farm, was one of about 10 or 12 kids. My dad dropped out of high school after Pearl Harbor and joined the Navy, came back and was working in the mines in Bessemer. He was in the mines. And some guy met him and liked my dad, and the guy had a real estate business, so he gave him a job, and then got started a savings and loan. And so he moved my dad over to the savings and loan. But my dad didn't go to college. My mom didn't go to college. But what my dad did is somebody gave him this pencil drawing of Coach Bryant. So he took it, he called Coach Bryant, and this was in summer of '82, which, Coach Bryant passed away in January. My dad called in and said, "Hey, I've got this." He got to Coach Bryant. I mean, I was so afraid of Coach Bryant, even after I finished, I didn't call Coach Bryant, but my dad called Coach Bryant and said he had this painting. Could he bring it down and have Coach Bryant sign it? So I've got it it's on my wall in my office, and it's to my good friend Lynette Davis. Best wishes, Paul Bear Bryant. But it's one of those things where Coach Bryant was he couldn't coach like it, but he would have adapted. He would have adapted to do things the way that he had to do them today, and he would be successful today. And the lessons that I learned. I'm a Christian. I take my faith seriously, but Coach Bryant, the lessons that he taught us. Coach Bryant was a Christian. And sometimes you kind of like, "Well, really? Are you sure?" but I wish I had been able to spend more time with him after I finished playing, just to sit down and talk to him and have that kind of relationship, because after playing there for 4 years, even when I'd go to Tuscaloosa during the summer while I was playing the NFL to work out, I was still intimidated by him, even though he had no control or nothing over any part of it. I'd walk down the hall going past his office, and I'd speed up when I got close to his office, because if his door was open, he could see everybody that's going up and down. And I didn't really want to go in and talk to him, because I was still intimidated by him. I'd be walking past his office, and I'd hear this, "Hey, Ricky, come in here." It's like, whoa.
I'm laughing because, I mean, that's the way you were afraid of him.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I didn't. If Coach Jordan called me and it'd be like, "Hey, Thomas, come in," and it'd be like, "Oh shit, what I do?"
Oh yeah. I remember we're sitting in a team meeting one day, and it's like, Coach Bryant is toward the end of the season, and so at the end of the meeting, Coach Bryant says, "I want to see Sylvester Croom, Mike Washington, and Ricky Davis in my office." after the meeting, and it's kind of like I looked at Sly. What'd we do? And it's like, are we in trouble or something?
Right.
So we go in and we sit down, and it's like we got invited to play in the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
It's like he's like,
Yeah.
you guys been invited to play in the Senior Bowl, and the losing team, the players on the losing team get $1,250, and the winners get $1,500. He goes, hell, that's a lot of money. If you don't want to go, I'll go play. But that was it was just kind of that separation. He never got too close, but I think he tried to get closer to when you were through playing. But that's what I miss. I wish I had been able to spend time with him before he died, to where you could kind of see that other side of it. But
when I did when I did my book, A Walk On, I met with Coach Jordan's son, and I'm sitting there talking to this guy, and I'm thinking, boy, he looks just like his daddy, And but he told me at one point, he said, you were one of his favorite players.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, is he just saying that because, he don't
Because
want me
you're
to
sitting
write
there,
nothing, he don't want me to write nothing bad about his daddy, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. I remember there was an exhibition game at Legion Field, an exhibition NFL game. And I'm up in the box, whatever. And I'm like you, I see him, but it's too late for me to duck, it's too late for me to go another way,
Yeah.
And
isn't that something?
Yeah. He says, Thomas, and we stepped into the bathroom, and he gave me his phone number, and he says, you're one of my boys, and you call me if you need me.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that.
That's great.
It means a lot.
It does.
But it's funny because you're right. I mean, you avoided him every chance you got. I don't know. What did I do? What did I do now? Let Michael and Barbara get another shot at it.
Well, Rick, I do have a question for you. I know you chose Alabama. You went to Alabama, but you were highly recruited by another school in the state of Alabama. Talk about the recruiting process and how did you make that decision to attend Alabama?
Well, Auburn recruited me earlier and really stronger than Alabama did. And I played quarterback in high school, and Pat Sullivan would have been a senior at Auburn. If I had gone to Auburn, I would have been a freshman, and back then freshmen couldn't play on the varsity. So that was the sales pitch that Auburn used. And Jim Hillier was kind of in charge. He was the freshman coach back at that point, I think. And Coach Hillier was in charge of the Bessemer area from a recruiting standpoint. And we had some guys that were seniors, John LaFrance and Dusty Gregory, and several guys that went to Auburn. And it was one of those things where they invited me to go with those guys, which would have been the spring of my sophomore year. And I hadn't started at quarterback my sophomore year, but I started my junior year. But they invited me to go down the spring before because I think they felt like maybe I'd shown that I might be a college player. But Auburn recruited me a lot. They were more aggressive. And I think the Bright Star in Bessemer, the restaurant in Bessemer, Jimmy and Nikki Koikas, huge Alabama fans. And I think somebody in Bessemer called, this was in the fall of my senior year in high school. Somebody in Bessemer called Tuscaloosa and said, hey, he could go to Auburn if you guys don't turn up the heat a little bit. And I don't know where they got that. I don't know if my dad or said something to somebody, but one morning I'm getting ready to go to school, and my mom knocks on the bedroom door. It's about 7:00. She goes, Ricky, Coach Bryant's on the phone. And I thought, yeah, right, sure. I'm thinking it's somebody from high school that's calling and so you go, and I picked up the phone, and it was like the voice. It was no mistaking that it was Coach Bryant. And he said, we want you to come down here. I'm not going to tell you what position you would play. You'd either be a defensive back or a quarterback. We'll put you where we think you can help the team the most. If you want to be a part of something special, come down here. If you don't, then good luck. that was his sales pitch. Is like, well, wait, oh, what? But that's what I'd grown up. I loved watching Coach Bryant's show on Sunday afternoon. It was one of the things where my uncle was the only one of my mother's brother was the only one of my aunts or uncles that went to college, and he went to Alabama. And so he really, was not trying to pressure me, but he was encouraging me to go to Alabama. So it all worked out. But I had a great experience on the recruiting trips to Auburn, and then had some great friends that played down there. And I represented Terry Bowden when Terry was the head coach at Auburn. So that was a interesting thing. I remember Bobby Louder talking to him one day, and something was said about me playing at Alabama, and Mr. Louder goes, "That doesn't bother me. I don't care what he said. That's not what you're doing now. You're representing our coach." So that was good. He was good to me.
That's interesting.
Michael?
Yes, Rick, you mentioned earlier that you don't represent players anymore. So does your practice primarily involve representing college coaches, or do you advise and represent coaches in professional leagues as well, or is it strictly college?
A little of both. We've got a few guys that are in the NFL. One of the guys is a running back coach for the Chargers, Derek Foster. Great guy. Coached at Samford. He was a running back coach at Samford, which is kind of the stairs that he's gone up since he was at Samford. He was working a camp in South Alabama, and the University of Iowa assistant coaches were working the camp too, and they liked him, so they hired him at Iowa. So he coached at Iowa for about 3 years as a running back coach, and then the Chargers. He's starting his second year with the Los Angeles Chargers now, not San Diego, but Los Angeles Chargers. So
Right.
But mostly college coaches, a few, and then I had worked with an athletic director at a school a couple of years ago doing the contract for the coach, and I got a call from an athletic director. It was probably back in January, wanted me to help him with his contract, which I did that. But I got out of the player business because I just didn't like a lot of the stuff that went on. That if you didn't do, then you really didn't have a chance to sign some players. You were pretty much eliminated if you weren't going to do certain things, and I just was not going to do what a lot of the other people were doing. But the coaching business it's changed a lot. When Robert Fraley and I first started representing coaches, there were Ray Perkins was our first client, and we represented Bill Parcells, who was the head coach of the Giants, and Joe Gibbs, the head coach of the Redskins, and Dan Henning. They didn't have anybody representing them back then. I mean, this was in the probably 86, 87, those years where, it was, it's changed a lot. I mean, I'm 69 years old, and so it's kind of like I'm going to kind of keep doing what I do until they kick me out the door here at my office. But I enjoy it, and I just try to do things. And again, I just look back to the lessons that I've learned in life from a lot of people at church, and then with Coach Bryant, do things the right way, no matter what.
Rick, and one of our viewers, Shirley Miller, wants to know the title of the book that you and Steve Skipper are working on. Have you come up with the title yet?
It is Steve. Steve's an artist, and what he did is it's 9780. 97 was John Mitchell's number, and Wilbur was number 80. So it's 9780, Bryant Boulevard, something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but it's I'll send y'all a copy of it, and so that y'all can once we get it all finished. But Steve, I talked to Steve over the weekend, and we've made some final changes. I'm paranoid about reviewing every page and every word, make sure there's a period where it's supposed to be. And my wife just, she said, leave it alone, you just don't want to. Ralph Stokes wrote a book. I don't know if it's called One of the First. If you're looking for a really good book about talking about the integration, Ralph was from Montgomery. We were freshmen together. Ralph wrote a book. He was at Booker T. Washington High School in Montgomery when they closed Booker T. Washington and they sent the students from Booker T. Washington, either Sidley Lanier or Robert E. Lee, or several of the, and Ralph ended up at Robert E. Lee. So he was one of the first black players at Robert E. Lee. Then he goes to Alabama in our freshman class, and he was one of the first black players at Alabama. And then he went to work for this national insurance company, and he was one of the first regional directors for this, black regional directors for this. And so, and now he's working for PGA Superstore, which is a chain around the country, and he's the national marketing director for that. But the name of the book is One of the First, and Ralph Stokes. And if you want to, Ralph has he went on Feinbaum, and Feinbaum has helped him just talking about the book. And then Ralph also has had boards of education, like schools, junior high schools and stuff like that. There was a junior high school in I think it was in Ohio, who bought like 500 books to use it as a teaching tool because it tells a story on the integration in Ralph being one of the first at different stages of his life. And it's a great book. And so that's that's one of the things that Ralph is a great friend. Sly is a great friend, and that was one of those things where I've had people say, "Well, how did your relationship with?" I said, "Hey, it's the Christian song when you're growing up, red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loved the little children of the world. These guys are my friends, and it's one of those things where it's just been, Sylvester room right across the hall from me at Bryan Hall, and before he got married. And it's just one of those things where I just have enjoyed the relationship that I have with those guys, and you try not to see what it's not a black, white, whatever. It's just about your relationship with them, with everybody. So.
Let me, well, I guess since we're talking books, I may as well get a pitch in for Walk On, which is my book.
Yes.
It came out in 2007. It's done really, really well, and I'm proud of it. And so it's available through Best Girl, anybody who's interested. I want to say this when we talked about the way we grew up. And if you remember, Rick, on Sundays, there was one NFL game.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the Suge and the Bear show.
That's right.
And so watching those two shows is really one of the things I think that inspired me, because, they were all white. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm going to go play for one of those schools. Mm-hmm. I want to be part of changing that dynamic. Yeah. And I think you had to have that in the back of your mind, that you could be part. And for me, it was to be a part of history, to be a part of making things different. There was all the civil rights stuff was going on. And this was a way to participate. This was a way to move things further down the road. And so I think when the younger kids, when they get those books, they can see that, wow, okay, this wasn't just about football. This is about life and changing life. And this is, I was doing something my dad never had the chance to do.
Right.
And then I remember when we would be playing and my family would come to the game, it was huge for them. This was big time, man. They could go to the games, and this was something they never had the chance to do. And so somebody just pulled up. I don't know who that is, but we'll see. But anyway, Rick, this has been great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. If you'll hook me and Sylvester up, that'd be great.
I will do that.
Matter of fact, I may even get in touch with Ralph and talk with him.
I'll send you both. Do you need Ralph's? Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know the name of James's book. Sam Hayes is the writer, Heyes. Sam also wrote a book about Henry Harris, which is just a fantastic book.
Yes.
And so we'll look forward to all those books coming out here in the fall.
Sounds
So
good.
thank you so much, Rick. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Good to see you guys, and look forward to tuning in more often. Okay.
All
Enjoy.
right.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, my closing commentary. The Forgotten Ones. That's the name they've been given by Gloria Owens. At least Gloria was the first one I heard refer to them as that. Who are the Forgotten Ones? This fall, there will be a breakfast sponsored by the James Owens Foundation. Owens was the first at Auburn, first football player, African American scholarship football player. This will be the second Owens Foundation breakfast. The breakfast makes it a point to invite the early Black athletes at Auburn, invite them back, many of whom who had great careers in football, basketball. Redding, player and student, was drafted by the Portland Trailblazers. Clifford Outland in track, and at one time the world's fastest in the world in the 60-yard indoor dash. Harvey Glance is a two-time Olympian, and others. They did their time, so to speak, and slipped off into the night. Some graduated, some did not. Until the Owens Foundation reached out to them, they had been forgotten. They will be forgotten no longer. And that is how I see it on September 6th in the year 2022. That's our show for today. We want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. Thank Michael Barber. Thank Rick, our G-list guest. You were great. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl. Thank Emily Hedrick, the communicator. Thank Sean Jones, the organizer, the producer of the show, and producer of Got a Minute. Remember, enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.